create a new dashboard. So here's our new dashboard panel. And what we've got is we haven't done anything yet. So we're going to create a graph. Well, there's no data in our graph when we first create it. So let's edit what's in this graph. Okay, so now you can see a real time up top. This is the graph, right? Last 6 hours, we've got no data points. Well, let's just create one called, oh, I don't know, let's figure out what our voltage is, right? We know that's a set of data we've created. So let's create one called voltage. So immediately you see now I've got voltage up here. So now we need some metrics. Well, I happen to know what my databases are called. You probably are going to see yours, if you've been following along, would be called IoT. InfluxDB1 is just my IoT one. Okay, so that's the data source. You can change data sources fairly easily if you don't find the measurement you're looking for. So I'm creating my query now here. My query says select a measurement, right? Obviously, I don't have the right database. There we go. So we're going to call this one voltage. So, and that's what I said. You can change data sources if you don't find what you're looking for. So wow, there's my voltages of all the data I've gotten in. So I ran this before. After 250, it stopped. Reran it again when creating the last piece of video, so you see more data there. Well, that's not really what I'm after, right? Because that's the mean voltage of all of the different readings that have come in on all 5 sensors. So instead, what might be interesting is let's remove that. So to remove one, if you click just on, not here in the parentheses, like null, if I click on null there, I can change that to, oh, fill it with a 0, right? If it's empty, or fill it with a null. But if you go on the fill, you can remove it, right? So if you click in the parentheses, you get the data points, right? If you click on the word itself, that is actually where you can remove it. So I'm going to remove mean, and instead, under aggregations, I'm going to go to distinct. So there's every distinct point. Well, that's fine. I want to set my time to every 10 seconds. That's fine too, but what I want to do here is I actually want to show the individual sensors. Aha, there's something that's interesting. Now I've got all my individual sensors. But here you see the names, voltage, distinct, sensor, sensor 5. So here in my naming pattern is where I actually put the tag, take the tag of sensor and use that as the alias. So as soon as I click there, here's my 5 sensor names. Great. It's automatically going to OR things. I don't need to do that for all of them. I showed you that before. If you want to choose individual sensors, you can do that. So let's say I only want where sensor equals sensor 1, there's sensor 1 data. Or maybe I want sensor 1 or sensor equals sensor 2. So now I've got 2 data points, right? You can remove, again, that filter just by clicking on that, and all 5 of them come back. Okay, so I've got some data. That looks kind of cool. I can actually go in here and change my axes. I don't have to right now. We're going to play with that here in a little bit. But for this, and we can, change our legend as well. If you want to set your Ymin and Ymax, here's where you'll do that. We've done that on some of the things. And you can also set alert ranges. So we'll probably create an alert on this one. But before we do that, let's go back and say this isn't all that interesting, because what I'm doing right now is looking at the last 6 hours of data. Instead, what would be more interesting is if I look at the last 5 minutes of data, and oh, by the way, instead of refreshing seldom, refresh every 10 seconds. So here you see I now have 10-second time slices, right? At any point I can go back and see what the actual values were that came in, and I can say, okay, that's pretty cool. I've got my voltages. So what we might want to do here is actually say, you know, why don't we let's see if I remember where to do this. Why don't we put, since we're doing voltages, where is it? Energy. Why don't we put there it is. Why don't we put voltages as what we're actually doing, right? Because, you know, why not? This is 118.0 volts, right? That's showing that. I can also do logarithmic displays. I can actually create label tags here for various things. One of the other things I can do here is maybe I want bars. Let's do lines. Okay, line width, maybe make that 3 to make it a little more viewable. Maybe I don't want anything underneath it, right? You can set your hover, you can stack things, so that looks, you know, they stacked on top of each other, but that's an additive thing. That's not exactly what we want here. You can do the points on there or not. You can do the bars on there or not. So various ways of changing what it looks like. Okay, now very important, before I forget, let's go ahead and save this. Here's where we name it my first dashboard. So now you can see up here, we've got my first dashboard. If you want to go back to a different dashboard, I can choose my sensor dashboard, or I can go back to my first dashboard. So now that I've got my first dashboard, we like to make this, you know, a little bit longer. We've got something that's useful though. But, you know, this is all nice and fine. I want to add one more thing to this. So I go back into Edit, and I say, you know, I want to set alerts on here. So I'm going to create an alert that says, this is a voltage alert, and I'm going to evaluate every 1 minute for the last 5 minutes. Okay? And I'm going to say, not average, but I'm going to say when the minimum of the query is below, oh, let's call it 113 volts, right? Then I set an alert. So I'm going to get an alert when it's below 113 volts. It's that simple. You can test the rule. You can actually go in and set notifications. I don't have any, this one won't reach out, but you can send notifications from here when that alert gets tripped. Probably want this more like, you know, 112. So, I mean, you can actually drag and drop it. It's crazy. The other thing you can do is, I like to put low and high ranges on. So 112 and say, you know, if it's above 127. So now I've got above and below ranges. Okay? I go back. Great, I've got my ranges here. I can actually add then an alert list, right? So here's my alert list that says what's going on. So I put that at the very top of my panel. And I've got my voltage. Ta-da! Here now actually alerting and watching your data come in from your database. It's that simple. So when Nicholas goes through his, you'll see how to take SNMP traffic in and do this exact same thing, and you can watch 5 different switches, what their voltage is as it comes into the switches. So let's do some other quick things that are a lot of fun. One of the things I like is, let's just duplicate it, go in here, edit this one, and say, not voltage, but let's look at the temperature. Ta-da, save. I'm now looking at the temperature. A couple of things, you know, that's not volts, so let's go in here and say that is temperature in Fahrenheit, right? It will get rid of your alerts. It will do that on you. So you'll have to reset those. But now I have temperature and voltage. And you'll notice, you know, this one's actually watching volts. This one's actually watching the temperature. Oh, you know, I didn't change the name. Let's edit the name. We gotta be good and do that. So this one is temp. I'm going to save that. Here's where it says it's tracking your changes. Added temp. And it tracks, if you've set up users, it tracks that. Now, look what just happened here. We've got unknown voltage. That's a problem. Why do we have an unknown voltage? Well, it looks like we've lost our temperature too. So let me guess what happened. If I pop this back up, no, it hasn't stopped. It's still running. Troubleshooting in real time. And it seems to be still putting out voltage. So I'm not sure why I got that alert. So hopefully that'll clear itself. I don't know what's going on there. So let's do some other things too real quick, and then I'll let you just start playing. One of the things, you can add a row. So this row title we can set to details, and actually want to drag my alerts above that. So now I can actually hide those, right? And make them show up again if I want to look at them, right? So let's add a single stat. That was a fun one to do. So let's go in, edit that. I'm going to look at bandwidth where the sensor is sensor 1. I want to look at the distinct every 10 seconds. And you see that gives me what the distinct value is. Well, that's not very fun. So what I want to do here is I want to set, let's set the value. No, let's set the background. Let's keep the value white. And I'm going to set the background to green, yellow, or red. So what I'm going to set my thresholds at are, I'm going to say it's green if it's 49.99 or less. Then it'll turn yellow, and then again I want it to turn red when it is 52.50 or higher. Okay, so now you can see it's green, 49.98. As the values come in, that will change, and if I get above 5 meg, then it will turn yellow, and if I get above 52.50, it will turn red. If I wanted to turn that into a gauge, I could do that right there. I probably would turn my background off, right? And I can start playing with the thresholds then. You actually usually invert the thresholds, so if it drops off too much, it's red. There are those types of things, right? So I'm just going to create this. Again, probably want this down below there. Forgot to name it. This is sensor 1 bandwidth. That's 1 BW. Okay. Don't need that so big though, so let's shrink that down. But let's have fun. Let's actually save the dashboard, adding gauges, just adding stuff. I should be able to duplicate this. There we go. It took a second. So let's make 5 of these. You can probably see where I'm going with this. So this one, let's edit and call it sensor 2 bandwidth. And our metric is bandwidth where sensor equals sensor 2. Go back. Let's edit this one. Call this one sensor 3 bandwidth. Change it to sensor 3. This one, edit. Make it sensor 4. Change the title to sensor 4 bandwidth. I mean, you can easily see how we're able to graph lots of different stuff fairly quickly, set up our values that we're watching, create little gauges. It's just fun to play with. There's our topic, and then we have our bandwidth gauges, right? So that's what I wanted to teach you, a real quick way to create dashboards out of data that you get from your InfluxDB, which is your time-sensitive database, from your messaging bus using MQTT, and bringing this all in using some Python scripting to tie it together. The next portion of this series will be doing the same thing, where we're taking in SNMP using a tool called Telegraph, which feeds into the InfluxDB to the Grafana dashboard. And then we're going to containerize that and try to make it so you can take it with you to any client site and quickly create dashboards that you can use to troubleshoot. So thanks for your attention to this, and hopefully this was valuable.